This is Fantasy Football Today from CBSSports.com.
It's Fantasy Week 9. We are telling you who to start and who to sit here on Fantasy Football Today. A special presentation for CBS Local Sports. I'm Adam Azer, Jamie Eisenberg, Dave Richard here. Starter sit, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. And let's begin with Jake Locker, Dave, at St. Louis. Start him.
Yes, I definitely would start Jake Locker. You look at his last 4 games, multiple touchdowns in each of them, and he's really starting to roll with this Tennessee offense right now. I think the future is really bright for Jake Locker. I liked what I've seen from him. If we're looking for 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, and even 10 yards rushing, that's going to be a great day for fantasy owners looking for a kickstart to their lineup in Week 9.
Okay, you get the guy that everybody wants to know about here. Tom Brady, starter sit.
I think you got to sit him, which is unfortunate. You know, it depends on who you have. If you're able to pick up a Jake Locker, if you're able to pick up Terrell Pryor, I like Pryor a little bit better. But I think you're looking at Tom Brady. 3 of his last 4 games with single digits in fantasy points. They're running in the red zone. That's a clear indication of not having Gronkowski for the majority of the season, obviously not having Aaron Hernandez all season. But Brady right now dealing with a little bit of a hand problem. It's a tough matchup against Pittsburgh. Every team they face in America, 20 fantasy points or less to the opposing quarterback. So they've done a good job against quarterbacks so far this year. The only one who's abused them was Matt Castle. That was in London.
So let's look at running backs now, and San Diego's Ryan Mathews facing the Redskins, Dave, and we got to start him, right?
I think you have to. He's the only running back in the NFL that's posted 100 yards rushing in consecutive weeks. It's amazing that Mathews is that guy, and the matchup against Washington is really, really nice. The Redskins have allowed 6 rushing touchdowns to running backs in their last 3 games. So really, it's setting up nicely for Mathews to continue his hot streak.
Jamie, Darren Sproles, last week, 4 catches, and that was it.
Yeah.
So, terrible week. He's been pretty bad this year, and he's facing the Jets. Starter sit.
Yeah, I'm so glad I traded him to some sucker who wanted to take Darren Sproles a few weeks ago. Obviously, he's been struggling a little bit. The playing time hasn't been what you expect for Darren Sproles. Clearly, they're relying a little bit more on Pierre Thomas. They're also leading in games, which is a big difference for where they were a year ago. They don't have to rely on that comeback-type efforts, which is where Darren Sproles typically has been valuable. But PPR leagues, it's hard to get away from, so I think you still use him as a flex option. But in standard leagues, the touchdowns haven't been there. He's only got 1 game this season where he scored touchdowns. It was twice against Miami. Otherwise, he's been pretty disappointing for the most part this season. I think he'll be disappointing again against the Jets.
Well, Denarius Moore is a player that you might want to start as we look at wide receivers here on Fantasy Football Today. Denarius Moore against the Eagles. Jamie, we're saying start him.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. When he's not facing the Steelers and their shutdown defense, he has the opportunity to play well, and I think this is a bounce-back week for him. I think that the Raiders are going to have a great game, great performance at home against a Philadelphia team that looks like they're struggling right now going across the country, and Denarius Moore facing a secondary, he should have the opportunity to really beat up. Clearly, we've seen when Terrell Pryor has big games, Denarius Moore is a big reason why. I think these 2 guys go hand in hand this week, and I think Denarius Moore is a top 10 fantasy receiver this week.
All right, Dave, how about a wide receiver to sit? You know, Marcus Colston actually just got dropped in a 10-team league I'm in, and I don't even know if I want to pick him up. So
I don't blame you one bit.
And for this week, though, we got to sit him, right?
You know, they tried to get him going last week. He led the Saints in targets with 6. They all came in the first half. He alligator-armed a deep pass late in the second quarter. He didn't get another target the rest of the game. So New Orleans is aware of that they need to get him more involved, but they don't necessarily care. The 8 different Saints had at least 3 targets last week. I think you can get away from Colston. The matchup isn't bad. Jets haven't been great against wide receivers. The strength of their defense is their run defense. But I think the Colston's just a guy, if you're expecting 7 fantasy points, that's what you're going to get from him. That's where you go.
I want more than 7 fantasy points from my tight end this week, so I'm starting Jordan Cameron, Jamie.
Yeah, I think you saw last week, you know, the targets were a little bit disappointing from Jason Campbell. Only 4 targets, but he caught all 4 of his passes, got over 80 yards receiving. I think he has an opportunity to do it again. Keep in mind, he's already faced Baltimore once. This is the first time in his career, or excuse me, this season, where he's facing a team for the 2nd time. So we'll see if the Ravens made some adjustments in slowing down Jordan Cameron. But you got to be excited about the way that he played, playing well the last 2 games. So the quarterback change really hasn't impacted him too much. But Jason Campbell kept him involved. And I think for the most part this season, the Ravens haven't done very well with good tight ends, Cameron being one of those guys. So I think he's still a top 10 guy this week.
So, Dave, look at our Week 9 sits so far. Tom Brady, Darren Sproles, Marcus Colston.
Just like we said all along.
I know, exactly.
Yeah.
And
And here's another one.
Jason Witten?
You got it. I've had it with Jason Witten. The only time he shows up is when when Dallas is in a close, high-scoring nip-and-tuck game. I don't think you're going to see that this week against the Vikings. I think the Cowboys are going to put it on cruise control. You take a look at how he's done. Under 50 yards each of his last 3 games with no touchdowns in that span. Just not really a consistent part of the offense. We're getting more from Terrence Williams. Des Bryant has taken over. I think Witten's a guy you sit this week.
Wow. All right, well done, fellas. We got a lot more for you on the website, fantasynews.cbssports.com. You can watch Fantasy Football Today live Tuesday through Friday, noon Eastern time, and Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern. these two, Jason Horowitz and Chad Johnson, tell you how to set your lineup for the week. This has been a special presentation of Fantasy Football Today for CBS Local Sports. For Dave Richard and Jamie Eisenberg, I'm Adam Azer. Good luck in Week 9.